Hi folks, we got a new bike, or actually I should say some new bikes to look at today. I saw one over the weekend at my home, right parked at a hotel close by my home. I took a picture of it. I'll show you the picture I took of it. And I said, what in the blue blazes is that? I had never seen it before. And I tracked it down. It's a brand here I hadn't heard of. It's a brand called Solar. And I tracked it down. There was no dealership in Rayong City. There was no dealership in Pattaya City. The only two that I saw were Chonburi and Klang. So we've come to Klang. Klang is probably the second biggest city in Rayong province. And there's a Yamaha dealer here that has a host of different things that you just don't see every day. We'll look at some of these. But the Solar, the one I looked at was called the Groove. They don't have a Groove here. The Groove is kind of an ADV variant of it. But they have some of the other variants. They have the Proud and another one. I'll show you a couple of these. But I got to thinking, you know, if you come here and you see people riding around on scooters, and I talk about them a lot, you think, well, maybe that's just kind of the way it's always been. But the Thailand scooter story is much more in depth than that. It's a much longer tale. The road that story follows definitely has some intersections and some off-ramps in it. So I thought we would just take this opportunity. It's a bit of a cloudy, rainy day, and maybe go over some of this. And I'll show you, take you a quick look back at the Thailand scooter story to see how we came from an abomination like this to a current day top state-of-the-art ADV scooter, which are all the rage now, like this. How do we go from that to that? And the answer may surprise you. I mean, a lot of people will tell you, hey, the scooters started in Europe, probably on some factory floor in Italy. And that would be incorrect. Believe it or not, the first scooter that really looks like anything modern day was from the good old US of A. That's right, it was called the Cushman scooter. Now, there was some things prior to this. A lot of those didn't have seats. I think the Autoped or the Motoped, and some of those were maybe made in France, but Amelia Earhart definitely popularized some of these in the early days, maybe in the 20s. But really, like I said, the first real type scooter was the Cushman. Not much of a suspension on these guys, but they were used extensively in the military during World War II. I think the idea was that they would drop these in behind enemy lines along with the paratroopers, and then the paratroopers could take their parachute off and jump on one of these Cushmans and go tear-assing around Europe looking for Nazis. I don't know that it exactly worked out that way, but the Army, to their credit, did find uses for them, like they do with almost every piece of equipment they're issued. They find a use. It might not be the intended use, but they find a use. And they did. And they were widely recognizable in that era in Europe. And hence, after all the hostilities were over, after the war ended, a lot of the factories and cities in Europe were left basically piles of rubble. And people couldn't get around in cars. So one enterprising young factory purveyor, Enrico Piaggio, he decided that, hey, we need some kind of small two-wheel conveyance to get around. Something kind of like that Cushman that the Yanks were using during the war. And he came up with his own better version of that. The engine was kind of concealed, and everything was just a little better. He took all the flaws that the Cushman had and tried to address them all and make something cool. And he did. And you probably know it as the Vespa. I think the first one rolled off the factory floors in 1946 in Italy. However, there's, depending who you ask, the reason it's called a Vespa, which means wasp, by the way, in Italian. It's either from the way it sounded or maybe from the way it looked from above. So, I don't know. There's an argument on why it was named the Vespa. The first couple prototypes didn't have that name. That was something added later. But either way, I think you agree that kind of took off and became popular. Another similar story with Lambretta. Although Lambretta was usually made very internationally. Many factories, even in the early days, maybe in the 40s and 50s in South America, Argentina, Chile, Colombia, etc. Surprisingly, quick tidbit, the very first Lambretta actually looked, I think, a lot like a Cushman. But anyway, these Italian, I should say, scooters, some found their way to Bangkok, but in the early days, in the 50s, early 60s, there weren't many scooters or even two-wheel motorized conveyances here in Thailand. The reason, first of all, they weren't what the country needed. A Vespa or a Lambretta was great in little urban areas and cities, but for Thailand, with a country at that time with maybe 80% of the roads unpaved, gravel, potholes, water, mud. Vespa wasn't the best thing to use, and they were kind of expensive. They were expensive in terms of Thai, what would be expensive in Thailand for Thais. So they weren't priced for the masses here in Thailand, although they may have been priced for the masses in Europe and maybe North America. In Thailand, not so much. They used bicycles still. Well into the 1960s, the bicycle was pretty much the main transportation because these other motorized conveyances just weren't affordable. Even though they were starting to come out with them left, right, and center, they just weren't affordable for the everyday average Thai. Now, a big step into making that affordable came in 1957 when the very first of these rolled off the factory line in Japan. It's what would be the #1 manufactured vehicle ever in the world, even to this day. It was called the Super Cub.
Conserve your energy and enjoy the fun, freedom, and economy of two wheels. A Honda is easy to ride. Even your brother-in-law can master it in minutes.
So that's right. Now, this was a huge step here in Thailand. I mean, they probably, even at that time, still weren't 100% priced for the masses, and it would take a while, a good while, for these to catch on here. Although in other parts of the world, they were an instant hit. North America, for one. But it's a huge step because the four-stroke, little small 50cc four-stroke motor had overhead valves, push rods. That was much more friendly for maintenance and repairs. It required much less maintenance than the historic two-strokes that were coming in here. So for that regard, it would have the longevity, it would have the ease of maintenance, ease of use. And I think for the most part, that's kind of what kick-started the whole revolution here. It would just take a while. I think one of the things that probably made it become more affordable for locals here was in 1967, Honda built its first factory here in Lad Krabang. That's up by Suvarnabhumi Airport, just north of the airport, present day. And guess what they built in that factory? That's right, Honda Super Cub. So now you might think, with the Super Cub, the Honda factory here, plus the remnants of the Vespas and Lambrettas and the other things that were kind of available at the time, everything evolved from there, and everybody here lived happily ever after. But you'd be wrong. That is not what happened. In fact, this is one of those intersections in the road. Several years later, in the mid-70s, the big Japanese automakers, Kawasaki, Honda, Suzuki, Yamaha, they were having some very good success in other markets in Europe and North America. I mean, they brought us the CB750 from Honda, Yamaha, the XS650. They were starting to churn out some good quality bikes that had maybe some of that old British styling, but some of the Japanese engineering and reliability. With that under their belts, they started looking at their neighbors in Southeast Asia, all around Japan. What did their neighbors need? How could they sell more bikes? And they determined, they took notice of what they needed. They needed something sturdy. They needed something cheap. They didn't always have good roads in these countries yet. They needed something cheap. They needed something that they could manufacture a lot of very quickly. So with everything they learned in some of their bigger sales in Europe, North America, they came up, all of them, each of them, came up with their own emerging market motorcycle. Now, this was a backbone motorbike. This was not a scooter. And I said, this is a real intersection kind of in the whole Thailand scooter story, because this was not a scooter at all. This was actually a rather decent size backbone motorcycle. And they started off very innocently. I think the RD, the Yamaha RD100 two-stroke though, that was a step backwards from the Honda Cub, but a big 100cc cylinder. So these could make some decent power, especially the two-strokes. And these, I believe, these were the first type of motorcycle, two-wheel conveyance that was affordable for the masses. I think they undercut the price of the Honda Cub. And they sold a lot of these. They sold tens of thousands of these. By the time I got here in the early 90s, in 92, these were relegated to the far back spaces of the dealership, and they were sitting there collecting dust because all the new hotness was parked out front, which I'll get into in a minute. But there were still plenty of these large backbone emerging market motorbikes for the masses on the streets. They were everywhere. And if you ask, to this day, if you ask a Thai person that's about my age, between 50 and 60, and ask them what they consider to be a classic motorcycle, chances are that's the answer they will give you. It will be one of these. In fact, it may even be one of the one of the ones I think gets the most credit, the most legendary street cred was the Yamaha RXS 115. This thing was a performance version of one of these. And I'll show you, 0 to 100, that's about like the same as 0 to 60 miles per hour. 0 to 100 kph, 7 seconds. Now to put that in perspective, today, modern day, your big scooters, your 300s, your 350s, the X-Max, the Forza 350, the ADV 350, these can barely manage a 0 to 100 in 9 seconds. So it's a full 2 seconds faster. It's not even a race between this motorbike from 40 years ago. So yeah, it was a barrel of monkeys. It was hold on and pray. If you notice today, even today, Yamaha's best-selling Underbone motorbike is not a 110 or a 125, it's a 115. And I think they stuck with that because knowing they had that legendary credibility from the old RXS 115, that's stuck in people's mind. So now they go to a Yamaha dealer, they still see Finn 115, totally different engine, it's 4-stroke, not 2-stroke. But I just think badging, sometimes name and badging and packaging matters. Anyway, by the time I got here in the early 90s, what they had kind of done is taken some of the drivetrains from these 2-stroke backbone motorcycles, and started putting them in Underbone scooter. A couple of notable ones, the Yamaha Bella, I think it was pronounced Bella, that was just everywhere at that point in the early 90s. And the Honda Sella, you had the Yamaha Bella, the Honda Sella. But the one I bought was called the Honda Nova RS, bought it brand new in 1992. I'll show you. This was a performance version of that. I think it was a 110cc engine, but a 5-speed proper gearbox with a clutch. The handlebars were a little bit raked in like clip-ons on a sport bike modern day. But it had bicycle type tires, had disc brakes front and rear, and a little bit of a racy paint scheme. I'll tell you how I described this. When I bought this, I rode this around here 33 years ago. When I went home, how I described it to my buddies was that it was a racing moped. And they all scoffed. And I said, what do you mean a racing moped? And I said, look, if you took a bike like an RM120 or an RM100, like a Suzuki, that was a popular Suzuki dirt bike at the time, and you put bicycle tires on it, stripped off all the weight you could, lowered it, you would have one of these. These were the real deal. How fast was this 0 to 60? Well, the amount of time it took to go from 0 to 100 kph was directly correlated with the size of your testes. I estimated in a best run, I estimated it would do about a 6.7 second 0 to 60. That's what I got, measuring it on my G-Shock watch at the time. That's the best I could rip off. So as you can see, even the one that I bought, but all of these in that era, in the late 80s, early 90s, the Honda Sella, the Honda Nova, the Yamaha Bella, all of those were Underbone scooters. And to this day, we have that still in the form of the Honda Wave, the Yamaha Finn. So that has stuck. The Underbone scooter, now they've changed the engine, they're no longer 2-strokes, they're 4-strokes. They are 110, 125 cc's, you know the story. And even these new ones we're looking at, the Solar Groove and the Solar Proud and all these, they're Underbone scooters. These are, I don't know, these are a little bit cheaper than their Japanese Honda and Yamaha counterparts, these Solars, but not by much. They have a promotion on the one for $39,000, the one is $41,000. I don't know, I think it's worth a little bit of extra to go with the Honda or the Yamaha in that case. They also have a couple trucks here, motor scooter trucks. These are basically the same drivetrain as these scooters, about 110cc engine with a 4-speed transmission, but it's actually got a proper differential and a 2-wheel. It's like a truck. It's like a little pickup truck. I don't know how to describe it. 4-speed, but you cannot get a license plate for these. You cannot register these. So these are for like use on a farm or something like that. If you had them up country, if you live in a small village, you could probably get away with riding it everywhere and using it for your main transportation in the village. A lot of these villages, or rural villages, are very tolerant of stuff like that, but in a city, especially like something the likes of Pattaya, not so much. But anyway, I don't know where we go from here. The current chapter, you might say, well, when did the twist and go market emerge? That wouldn't be till much later, until about 2006. First year for the Honda Click, first year for the Yamaha Fino, both very popular twist and go models. The Honda PCX not until 2009. By the way, my PCX that we have is a 2009. It's the first year. It's a 125. But anyway, next year will be the anniversary of some of those twist and go scooters, the ones that the expats here kind of gravitate to as kind of their primary transportation in places like Pattaya. If you rent one, chances are it's going to be a Honda Click, a Yamaha Fino, something like that, maybe a PCX. I think they're here to stay. It's 20 years strong almost. They're not going anywhere, and they are making advancements. So that's definitely another chapter, the next chapter in the Thailand scooter story. The ADV market, some of these ADV variants, I think might not be a chapter, might just be a footnote in that chapter. But I think the very next chapter, the one that is really still being written, is on the electric battery-powered scooters. They are gaining popularity, and every day there's new ones flooding in here. So I think that will be a chapter, but that chapter is still being written. So that's a story for another day.
There you go. A little bit of the Thailand scooter story. Many, many years in the making. I guess in a nutshell, you could say that, hey, maybe Thailand was a little bit late to the scooter party in the early days, but I think they've more than made up for that over time, and now one of the leaders of the pack. So there you go. We'll take a quick look around Yamaha here. The Fino did not make 20 years like the Honda Click looks like it's going to make. Next year will be the 20-year anniversary for the Click. This is the Fazio. I guess that kind of replaced the Fino. In terms of some of the off-brands that they had available here, Ryuko is another one. R-Y-U-K-A, Ryuka. I don't know. After looking at them, unless the budget's really strapped, or maybe it's for a first-time buyer or something, I would probably just save my extra bot and buy the Yamaha or a Honda. Anyway, hope you enjoyed the episode. Something else next time, but for this one, I gotta go ahead and leave it off right here. And as usual, I'll thank you for watching. And until next time, bye for now.